what are some of the things that somebody thinking about consulting, maybe they have a surface level of understanding, what do they not understand about what it's like on the recruiting side of these consulting firms?
Absolutely. Happy to answer that question and the process. But the first question I always ask people before you think about consulting is, again, the why question is, why do you want to get into consulting? And really, there's a whole presentation that I could send anyone who wants it. Is I think the why is the most important because the recruiting process is going to take a lot of time and it's mentally just a commitment you have to make. So I want to make sure that people are going in it for the right reasons. So again, like I mentioned, it's like if you're willing to work hard, you want to learn, you want to be mentored, and you're willing to put your ego aside, it's great. But if you're looking for a steady 9 to 5, I get to go home, have dinner at the same time, I all my performance reviews are great, I don't have anything to work on, and I don't need to feel worried that I don't know how to convince this person to take this action, then if that's you, that's like consulting's not it. But if it is consulting is for you, then you start the process. The good news is that at a very high level, getting into consulting is very simple. At a high level, it is get the interview and then second, pass the interview. It's the process within it that takes a little bit more. And so the good news is, and you've done this beautifully on the channel as well as on your Quora posts and everything else, is that before 20 years ago, yes, you needed a Harvard degree, you needed an MIT degree to be able to get in. But as firms grow, they realize three things. One is that diversity of experiences impacts in a positive way. Second is that not all the best talents went to Yale. They went to UConn. They went to other schools. They went to Simon School of Business and so forth. So they have this expansion. And third is because everything, especially after last year with 2020, is because a lot of the interviews can be done digitally. The range is a lot more than it was before. Because if you imagine, like in the 90s, when internet was very few and recruiters had a budget and they can only fly to certain campuses, and you had a choice between flying to University of Florida versus flying to Duke, it's kind of like you take your odds there. Not saying anything's wrong with University of Florida. It's like, it's just back then it was not an even playing field, but now it's even more of a playing field. But the con is that there are more people applying, record highs every single year, people applying to consulting. Even though the industry is growing, the percentage goes down because there's more people applying than the growth of spots that are opening. But once you get in, there's a couple of things that you need to know, which is I always ask these questions. That if I had to summarize the best ways to get the interview and pass the interview, it comes down to these two sentences. When it comes to getting the interview, it's what value can you add to the firm? So many people, they write their resume about them. It's me, 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 me.
Yeah,
but really, go back to
the biggest mistake.
Exactly. Versus, and you talked about this in your resume and cover letter video. It's like flip it around. It's like think about what does the firms want, and how can you make sure that they know it. That's pretty much the methodology that we teach. Obviously, it's more detail into the resume and cover letter, but it's at a very high level. It's thinking about how to be a consultant before you get the job. Is a consultant is all about adding value to the client, putting them first. Well, the consulting firms that you're applying to are your clients in this situation. So how do you show them that you can provide the skills or have the potential to? Because you don't need a perfect GPA. You don't need to come from a Harvard. You don't need to have the perfect background. But what you need to be able to do is communicate the value that you add. As in, if you don't take my word for it, you can literally go to our reviews page, and there are people who were former musicians. We had a bartender. We have flight attendants. We have salespeople. We have so many people coming from these odd backgrounds and non-traditional backgrounds, and they're able to get into consulting. So if a musician and a bartender can get into consulting, I am convinced. We also have a wedding photographer as well. Get into consulting, I am convinced that most people can. And when it comes to getting the interview, or after you get the interview, the passing the interview part, it really comes down to knowing how to think like a consultant. So many people, they'll read books, they'll pick up a book, they'll read it, they'll memorize what questions, but really you're not being tested on can you memorize facts and figures. It's really, how do you like to think like a consultant? And that's pretty much the methodology that we teach is how do you think like a consultant? And luckily for you is like we've done it in less than a week. As in, if you approach it as, okay, how do I cram these answers in? You're going to fail. Because one, the interviewer sees through that. But also second, and I'm worried about this always, this is why I don't encourage memorization in our program, is that once you start the job, yes, I get you the job, but I want you to succeed. I don't want you 6 months later to get fired because you couldn't think on your own. And that's the whole process of learning how to think like a consultant.